It is an absolute pleasure to welcome everybody back. As some of you know, my name is Adam Weissman. I'm the founder of Weissman Law, which is a media and entertainment firm that focuses on a mix of working with traditional entertainers, artists, and also a lot of forward-thinking digital and social creators, folks in that space too. Um, Really excited to have my friend Audrey here today, who I'll say is more on the creator space, but is doing things that, in my opinion, is kind of bridging the gap between the two spaces in some ways, and also helping creators figure out longevity, which is a major area of concern for us at this firm, as we're going to talk about a lot throughout the next hour or so. Um, Back of our mind, whenever we're working with new creators, is how do you make sure things don't get stale? How do you make sure that in a year or two you're still going to be, thriving and growing and not necessarily relying on one or two, let's say, completely uh, non-reliable streams of income. I think as we'll get into over the next hour, brand deals is really what started the creator agency industry, the creator economy. That's sort of what founded it and what made it from just being, in my opinion, people hosting blogs to for fun, growing an audience to something that became a way to earn a living, to something that became an entire industry that is now just pervasive throughout every area of not just the brand space, but media and entertainment as well. So it's exciting to talk to somebody like Audrey, who I will let introduce herself in a moment, because she's going to do a much better job than I can, about what else we can be doing now that we're in 2026 and things seem to have shifted over time. We've seen lots of ups and downs, both on the brand deal side, as well as with creators trying to figure themselves out, trying to figure out what they're doing, how to grow revenue. One thing that I will probably refer back to a lot is I remember early days felt like every influencer was trying to get a drink deal, which, as we're probably going to use that as an example quite a bit, wasn't the best fit for everybody back in the day, but it seemed like every other agreement that was coming across my desk for something other than a normal brand deal was an influencer trying to set up a drink. There are a handful that are wildly successful today, but for the most part, all those drinks are gone now.
Yeah.
That being said, before we dive into things, I have to give my standard disclaimer that everything we're going to be discussing today is for educational and informational purposes only. If we raise anything that you have any questions about from a legal perspective, by all means, we encourage you to consult with a lawyer and ask them, someone barred in your area, someone that knows this stuff. Obviously, we're here to chat after if anybody wants to reach out, but we will be answering questions on the side with the disclaimer that I am not going to solve your legal problems today. That being said, if you bring up any interesting legal issues that we can talk about, I would love to chat about it. With that being said, before I dive into anything of substance, I want to hand the floor over to my friend Audrey, who's going to introduce her business, herself, a little bit of what she does, and why she's here in the first place. So, Audrey, please take the floor.
Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for having me. I'm Audrey. I'm the founder of Lucky Number 12. We work with creators, specifically in the knowledge and expert-driven spaces, and help them with their basically building out their whole business back end and setting them up to scale off of their owned products, their owned IP, whatever that looks like for them. We will sometimes work with them on the brand deal and partnership side, but for us, it's really important to set that great foundation of what are those revenue streams that you have full control over versus relying on brand deals to come in, to be paid on time, and to close the way you want them to. That's a little bit about us in a very brief nutshell.
How did you get into this space specifically?
So I've been in the knowledge space for almost 10 years now. I started in-house working for more like life coach style people. It's interesting. Like, I feel like today the knowledge creator is a very commonly used term, but I feel like when I got started, like there was the knowledge industry and like the infopreneur industry, which I would say is kind of where I came from. And that's like, you know, in the olden days was like your self-help books, your room, like conference room in a hotel, going to a seminar on the weekend. Like on the really negative side, it could be like a cult. I never got into like that world, but I feel like that's kind of what the knowledge base was, or what was known as, for a long time. And then there were influencers, and now there has been this merging of this knowledge creator of people who are like creating and sharing their knowledge in a broad space. And these worlds have just kind of melded together. So that's kind of how I got into this, and I've had my agency for about 5 years now.
Great. And we'll go into specifics of issues and kind of why we all agree this is a great space to move into more for a lot
Yeah.
of folks. Not necessarily every creator, but a lot of creators. But would love to hear from you just some tangible examples so we can maybe grasp onto something with a little more meat to understand the types of things you're setting up for the creators that you're working with.
Yeah, so we have one creator that we work with, for example, who she's in the corporate space and she's a C-suite executive. We've helped her build out this very robust digital membership community. She had built up a six-figure audience on social media in addition to working her full-time job and wanted to have something to more formally gather people. People were asking for it, wanted to learn from her in more than, 75-second chunks, which is what you're getting on Instagram or TikTok. So we helped her build that out. We have other clients. We have a client who's actually launching a book in the next 1 to 2 years, and she wants to really grow her platform and her presence in the meantime, like very similar. She's a high-level executive at a major tech company and, wants to build her footprint out so that by the time her book comes out, there are people waiting and ready and excited to buy versus being like, who's this woman I've never heard of who just launched a book?
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I'll say on the flip side of that, we work with a lot of authors. We've
Mhm.
been working in the publishing space for as long as the practice has been around.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing to see, much to the chagrin of some of the more, I'll say, traditional authors, is the
Yeah,
biggest book deals I've seen cross my desk in the last 2 years have been with creators. It's been with folks
yeah,
who have built an audience that goes to the creators for their knowledge, that is simultaneously being taught by those creators, but also entertained. And that's a key point, right?
Mhm.
There needs to be that element of it. And it's fascinating to see the advances for those books
Yeah,
just, for better or worse, absolutely blowing out of the water the advances of more traditional authors who've gone a traditional path. Funny enough, we had our friend Gabrielle Korn on another
Mhm.
webinar recently, who is a published author, and we were talking about the need to build up a
Yeah.
following outside of just your core book audience if you're going to be going to that place. So it's exciting to hear you talking about a future book launch in a year or two and what you need to do leading up to that.
Yeah, we have another client who has grown a very successful audience, and we were talking about her origin story, and she said, I want to write a book, and I haven't, despite a very successful career at like, she's like, I can't get in with the right agents or the right people, even though I have these great stories and great advice to give. So she started building a platform online, and now like she has done so many things that are making it much more easy to get a great publishing deal.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's also really interesting to see that literary agents are they're a gatekeeper. They always have been,
Yeah.
but now seeing that there are ways for authors to potentially, I don't want to say bypass that completely,
Hmm.
but at least kind of give themselves a jump start so they're not 100% reliant on the agent relationship because it is really tough to find a good agent who can get you a good deal. But knowing that you've already have this core audience that's going to buy into it or is excited to see what you're doing, it's proof of concept right there.
Yeah.
That being said, before we digress into too many steps,
I know we can talk about books for like 2 hours.
yeah, I want to talk about sort of concerns that you and I probably have
Yeah.
about being, let's say, reliant on brand deals exclusively. Most, like I was saying, when I started in this space, it was late 2016, early 2017, where there was a shift from a lot of what people would call bloggers into the capital
Mhm.
diet influencers. And the sole source of income that I was seeing in that space was literally just traditional brand deals. It'd be a post or two. As I
And
told
affiliate revenue. Remember when that was the big one?
Yes, yes, that was a big one too, which I didn't see too much of that because that was just platform. So
Yeah,
it's not like I
fair.
had much insight into it. The affiliate revenue on blogs was huge. It's still a thing.
Hmm.
It's great if you know how to leverage it properly, but I feel like it's a tough sell for a lot of creators. But most of the things that crossed our desk back in the day were just straight up brand deals. You post this, we'll pay you. Obviously, abide by the Federal Trade Commission rules and all that stuff. But it was very simple. And the scary part is you are really at the whims of brands coming to you. You can have a manager or an agent who's going out there and pitching you. But at the end of it all, you don't get to make that decision of whether to work with the brand or not. And I've seen creators, especially unrepresented ones, just spend years trying to maintain or build relationships with brands, getting very little back except for maybe the occasional piece of free product.
Yeah.
There's that. And then there's, of course, the inherent risks of the platforms themselves, which is something we like to talk about as well, which is, we are at the whims of the algorithms to some degree. You can only control what folks see so much. And so who knows if one day you're just getting an unbelievable amount of views to the next month, something shifts slightly and your viewership just drops tremendously. So being beholden to these platforms exclusively is a pretty scary prospect. So a lot of times when we get new clients, one of the first things I do is ask, okay, are you just on one platform? Are you on multiple? Do you have your own platform? Like Audrey was just talking about, sort of building out your own place where creators can go, where your audience can go to get your stuff. It's part of the reason I like subscription-based services as well. There's incentive on the platforms to sort of support the creators to, I'll say, a greater degree than the free services that we get. But it's a mixed bag, and I would never recommend that somebody go exclusively to one over the other. But would love to hear your thoughts, Audrey, on sort of like the traditional and the risks there.
I mean, like, where do you want me to start? Do you want me to start on the brand side or on like the technology side of
What
it?
what's well, what's the most salient to you? Because you're coming at it from a different angle than we are, right?
Well, I think on the brand side and like the brand partnership side, I think, it's such a double-edged sword. I love brand partnerships. I think they're so fun. I
Yep.
love getting to, on like even on our side when we're representing a creator, like you get like the inside scoop on like what the brand's working on and you get to help them. Like it's so like you get the advantage of being part of their in-house marketing team without like being part of their in-house marketing team and like having to be there forever and you get to just like be creative. That being said, you are part of their like an extension temporarily of their marketing team. So what you're creating has to support their brand, not necessarily your brand. Now, the best brand deals and the best brand content should support both. I think we all know that the most successful content should still feel like organic and natural to the creator themselves. But at the end of the day, like the brand is hiring you as a creator to do a service for them at the end of the day. And while, yes, it might be like closer to like, I think like I come from the service provider world, right? So like I'm always thinking about these as like service provider agreements. Like it might be kind of closer to like a work made for hire. They can't tell you exactly how to do everything, but like they can dictate what the final work product looks like. And that can be very restrictive and can create distrust within your audience if you're not partnering with the right people, like in our beverage example from the beginning, or it there could be a lot of cons. On the other side, if it's something that you have complete control over, like, hey, my audience has been asking me to create X. I get this question 3 times a day in my DMs. You know that there's demand for that. You can be creating for literally what your audience wants versus what some brand who's there to just do a transaction with you wants at the end of the day. So I think like you just have to kind of consider that. And then when it comes to the technology side of it, it always goes around like social media is rented land, right? You don't own it, you don't own your audience, you can't export them in the same way you could with like an email platform. Like even Substack, I actually think is much closer to social media than it is an actual marketing platform in terms of how they operate. I think it's a great platform for growth and visibility, but it really just is another social media platform at the end of the day. So like it's important to diversify just like you would in any other you know, business. I think the thing like we talk about internally with my team a lot is a creator business is a business like any other business. When I was in my 20s, I worked at a fitness studio and we had all of these like physical things. We first of all, we had a physical space, right? We had all the equipment, we had clothing, we had all these things and we counted the inventory every day. We made sure everything was maintained like there was a level of care and standard of these things that we could physically hold. And I think because for a lot of creators, you're not like physically holding your videos. Like sometimes like your data and your statistics and your media isn't treated with the same level of care as you would for physical inventory. And like that's the shift I want more and more people to make is like treat it like a business with true assets that you are here to scale.
Yes, and it's a tough shift for a lot of folks because a lot of
Yeah.
creators sort of fell backwards into the space.
Mhm.
where they didn't expect to be making any revenue off of it. They started
Yeah.
on Instagram just for fun or started on YouTube just for fun. And
Mhm.
then suddenly they're waking up and they're hitting close to six figures. And you
Mhm.
get to that point, and you do have to take a step back and go, the basics. Oh, should I be incorporating or forming an LLC? Really simple
Yeah.
stuff. More importantly, if you are working with other people behind the scenes, are they on a contract? Like, are you
Yeah.
thinking about these things in a way that a normal business owner would? And a lot of creators don't bother because they're like, we've been doing
Yeah.
it this way so far. It's fine. And unfortunately, those creators, from what I've seen over the last 10 years or so, tend not to have a lot of longevity because the cracks show after a while. If
Yeah.
you are not treating your company like a business, there will be minor things that pop up one year that just over time grow exponentially. The biggest one I always come back to is like, if you are working with other human beings, you
Mhm.
need to make sure they understand what their role is. And that's usually
Yeah.
done via contract. Get something in writing because the last thing you want is 3 years out, somebody saying that they want to walk away with a piece of what you've been doing because there's nothing in
Mhm.
writing, right? And I've seen that
Yeah.
play out in real life. We have somebody on LinkedIn asking a question for you, Audrey, which I'll read out. It's a good question. What's something about brand deals that look great from the outside, but actually may be limiting behind the scenes?
Ooh, what looks good but can be limiting? I think like giving too much creative control over scripting, I think especially for early creators that they think like, oh yes, they're just gonna tell me what to say and it's great and like I don't have to do the work. I just have to like show up and film something and then I'm done, But actually like you're losing a lot of the you behind that. So I think like what are the things that make you special as a creator? Like what are the things that you bring and make sure you are like always advocating for and fighting for that. And I think there's just strings on everything. Like I think even on the gifting side of things, like, yeah, getting gifts is great and cool, but not until somebody slides into your DMs and is like, hey, like, what'd you think about it? Are you going to post it on stories? Like, do you have any feedback? And then they're just kind of like, all these little micro things take up your time and your energy. And, you know, is that leading to something bigger at the end of the day?
Be so selective when posting about
Yeah.
products that brands gifted you. Like, really think about it carefully. And I would say only do it if you are truly trying to build something with them. Otherwise, it's not worth the free stuff. You can buy most of those products yourselves. It's fine.
Yeah. I want to add one thing though. I think
Please.
like the people on the other side of the phone have no idea what your relationship is with any brand. That is both a danger and a gift, but I think a lot of times it's a gift. For example, I've had clients who like will post about something that we did with a brand and like maybe we weren't paid by that brand or maybe there was like some other sort of trade, but to other brands and to the audience, they think, oh, they must have been paid X amount of tens of thousands of dollars to do something like this. So remember that there can be a perception trade-off that you can use as leverage down the line.
That's a good point. That's interesting. Make sure you disclose properly. But
Yeah,
aside
yeah,
from
yeah. No, no,
that, yeah, no,
I know.
that's a fantastic point. And I think on that point, when you are negotiating your deals
Mhm.
with brands, things like getting paid extra for exclusivity might seem great at
Yes.
first, but then you realize, oh, I'm really hamstringing myself by being stuck here.
Yeah.
Even when a brand wants to pre-negotiate options for new usage, that sounds good in
Yeah.
theory sometimes, but then you realize, I might be significantly bigger in a year,
Mhm.
or I might be trying to get deals with competing brands that
Yeah.
this optional usage could stop that from happening completely. And going back to your talk about sort of control with the narrative and being able to guide your content, I will say this. I have not worked with a single legitimate brand in the last 5 years that will not fight for final say on the video or the post before it goes live. It's kind
Yeah.
of just the nature of the beast at this point.
Totally.
That being said, when you are getting to know a brand as a creator, you should be constantly front and center identifying that your tone and voice needs to be heard. If they're going to be issuing a brief, you say, yeah, happy to look at it, but I'm not agreeing to all of it until I've actually looked at it. And I think that's a big part of it too, where, yeah, you might not be able to have legitimate final say, but you can get really nuanced into what you can versus what you can't control. And it's absolutely worth it there. So I would say look out for those pieces there. Um, So let's move on. We've talked about some of the risks with brand deals. Brand deals are great. Nobody's saying here to stop doing
Yes,
it.
yeah.
Like that's a
Big fan.
fantastic
We're
thing.
fans.
Yes. But that being said, let's talk about owned revenue. Let's talk about sort of what you're really focusing on developing. You mentioned a few examples, books, courses. What other types of things are you looking into these days?
Memberships, podcasts. I have a lot of clients exploring like technology and custom apps that has its own risks and challenges that come along with it. I'm like, you guys, not everybody has to become a tech founder. It's going to be okay. But it could be kind of anything. I think, one of the advantages of this weird wild, wild west we're in with like AI and how technology is advancing so fast is things are advancing so fast. Things that you couldn't do before or that you couldn't do without a lot of resources are now so much more possible. So we're kind of in the space of like, well, what do you want? Let's have a conversation about like what your dreams are and what you like, what the vision is for the best experience. And let's see what makes sense for you based on your risk profile, your audience size, your capital. Like, obviously, there's a lot of things that go into it, but I was even, like I was joking with the team member yesterday. I sent off a proposal as like a little web page just because I'm kind of testing a new tool and want to see. It took me like 20 minutes inside of Manus to just like spin up a web page. And she was like, this would have taken 6 weeks before, to do something with this level of difficulty. So I think like the we're just kind of in a weird world. You can do whatever you want, you know?
What types of, I guess, how far are you going when it comes to your creators building stuff in-house versus you going out and setting them up with different types of, let's say, merch vendors or other publishers and things like that? People who are
Mhm.
doing the physical work versus hiring people in-house.
So I always operate on the philosophy of like, what is the most MVP way we can start before we go? So when it comes to things like merch, for example, I always like to try a dropship model first at a very limited way while we're also exploring an actual merch vendor that we can be producing with because, producing proper merch with the right sourcing can be a 6-month process, whereas I can drop ship something and have it to your house in 2 weeks. So obviously there can be some quality trade-offs, but let's see, like, is your audience actually wanting to buy this merch that you think they want? Because they say they want it, but are they actually willing to pay for it? And before you go invest $100,000 in inventory and warehousing, let's see, like, okay, can you move $10,000 worth of products in 2 weeks? If not, let's maybe have a different conversation. So I like to kind of take that approach. It's very similar with like this whole like app technology thing. It's like, okay, what's like a really simple low lift MVP we could spin up in a lovable in a replit that's like very contained. Let's see if people like it. And then how can we like have a conversation with the developer to build it out further and actually like make into something we charge for. And then when it comes into the education space, I love to do like some live teaching first. Let's do whether it's a webinar, whether it's an interview series like this, whether it's let's teach like a 3 session series online. Let's see what sells. And if that does well, let's see how much demand there is for it. Let's see what the response is. Let's see what the feedback is. And then, okay, let's go and spend $20,000 producing a proper course with a full production team. So I like to like you can do a lot on Zoom, at home and test and start to play with scale and still have it look great, still have the content be excellent. Like people care more about the quality of what they're, at least in the knowledge base, they care more about the quality of what they're learning at the end of the day than they care so much about the mechanism with which it is delivered. That can always evolve over time. You don't have to start at the top. So have like just focus on great content, great education, and we can kind of scale it from there.
I'm seeing a big shift in the last, I'll say, year and a half, and probably going forward to IRL stuff. Are you dipping your toe into that space yet?
Okay, yes, but I am not seeing it as a big shift. I mean, I guess from like COVID, sure, but I
Sure.
feel like I've like always loved events. And I feel more that we're just like rebuilding and that, 6 years ago we couldn't do
Fair.
any
Fine.
events. When people are finally like, we're getting back up to like where we were before. But like, I remember going to like a Create and Cultivate in 2018, and it was like sold out, packed in Brooklyn. I think, what's so interesting in being in such a chronically online space is I think we have a different awareness of what's happening around us than we did before because we have a different level of access. Events have always been one of the best ways to like shortcut connection, because you're literally physically in person with somebody for a full day. You can do so much in that period of time. So I think now that we're like, before I might have gone to 5 conferences in a year and nobody would have known because who would I have told? And now I'm like, okay, oh, I'm on like a new flight every month going to an event. It's like, oh my God, events. It's like, we've been doing this for 20 years. Now you're just seeing us all do it.
That's a really good way to frame it. I actually hadn't thought of it that way. That makes a lot of sense. I will say, anytime we go somewhere and we post about it, it seems to get people more excited than anything else we do too. So
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense. Let's take a step back. What sorts of pitfalls are you seeing creators fall into when they're deciding to make the leap into offering something new to their audiences? Like, where are the misses?
Oh, I mean, I think just like overthinking it. I see that a lot. I mean, I have this problem too of just like, what are all the things that could go wrong? What are all the things that could go right? And not just kind of like doing the thing. I think on the flip side is sometimes also underthinking. I think there's like two sides of it.
Thinking in general sounds
I think
like,
this thing,
yeah.
thinking in general is just really hard. I get it. So I think when it comes to anything like, you know, anything on social, for example, is while permanent, deeply impermanent at the same time. It's a great place to like test and iterate. I think once you start getting into paid, it's important to do research, to test, to be taking feedback, and to like not post and ghost on your product in the same way you could do on a social media post that nobody's paying for at the end of the day. Um, I think that's a really common pitfall. I think not just like spending a like just sitting with things for a little while. I think we are in our space of rapid iteration and rapid testing and let things marinate for a little while longer if you want a business with longevity and with legs. Be really clear on what you want, at the end of the day, because especially if you're building a personal brand business, you are building something around your identity. Make sure you
Yep.
are evolving your identity in a place you want it to go and maybe read something like The Alter Ego Effect or one of those books that can kind of help you create a little bit of distance between who you are online and who you are in the real world so that you don't kind of put yourself into a little bit of an existential crisis because of this brand that you've built.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Last year I saw a lot of creators start Substacks that very quickly got dropped because everybody
Yeah.
thought it was just the thing to do. And realizing that, hey, maybe my medium is not long form
Yeah.
written for my audience is something you need to figure out before you dive into it, because that is a lot of work. And certainly would not
Yes.
recommend people take the shortcut of just using AI to type up your Substack, because that'll be figured out very quickly, and your
Yes.
audience will not be happy about that. But
Mhm.
yeah, the underthinking and overthinking is interesting. I've seen it from both sides. I've seen clients who've been talking about potentially launching something for 4 or 5 years, and at a certain point, I'm like, I guess that's not happening. And then, of course, the flip
Mhm.
side of people just diving into new trends way too quickly. If you're going to be
Yeah.
developing a course, for example, you do need to take it methodically. If we're going to get into the granular, exciting legal parts of it, it's like you need to build that out slowly. You need to be very careful about the
Mhm.
information you're putting out there. If you are in the educational knowledge space and you are touching on medical things or legal things or financial advice, you should be very, very careful about what you're creating that will ostensibly be somewhat permanent. Put your disclaimers in there. Make sure you are not that if you are, we work with a handful of doctors and
Mhm.
other types of licensed professionals. Do not do things that your licensed degree or that your license in your state does not allow you to do, because it's very
Yeah.
easy to fall into the trap of, even I see this when we do things like this. Like when I'm in
Mhm.
a closed room with a client, I will say certain things that I certainly should not be saying in an
Yeah.
open webinar like this. It's the same type of idea. Working out the disclaimers that you need to include, like really basic stuff that you need to be a little more deliberate with. And then going even more granular into it, if you're creating something and you're working with somebody like Audrey and you're really developing it, take the time to think about what you're building, what you should be protecting from a copyright perspective, what you should be protecting from a trademark perspective, whether you should be taking a moment to spin out that project into its own entity. So make sure that your main line of revenue isn't touched. Do all these things like we were talking about before, like a business. Really think about it methodically. If you're going to be putting out a course a year or something like that, that is your output as a business. You need to protect it in that way. And there are
Yeah.
ways you can protect a course through copyright, through trademark, through other things. You can't protect ideas underlying all that stuff, but you can
Mhm.
protect the way that it actually manifests itself. So think about that. It's easy to do. I advise a lot of clients like, hey, copyright registration, honestly, don't even need our help with it. If you understand how that website works, it costs like between $45 to $65 to file, and then you have it for the life of the copyright. So think about those things. Take a moment to do that. It is far the work you're putting there is far less fleeting than the stuff that you're putting out on social media. I never advise, very rarely, I should say, advise clients to worry too much about copyright issues on Instagram, for example. I say if you think somebody's ripping you off, we can look into a DMCA notice if you're familiar with that
Mhm.
and just get it taken down, and that's it. But spending more time on that is probably unnecessary because in a month, very few people are going to be looking at that post. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And ultimately the reason why they're buying it from you is because they want to buy it from you at the end of
yes.
the day. I in my past life I was a musician and I went to school for music, and you know, pretty much every music school follows the same curriculum. You can learn violin from all sorts of people, right? But you want to learn it from, this one person because they play the way you want to, or you just relate to them. And, you know, I think like people get very precious about their ideas and what they're sharing, to which I'm like, you just got to get over it because there's no such thing as original thought. Like, I just don't think that's a thing. And I think to your point, yes, there's many ways you can and should protect the things that you create. I think that's very important, but overly obsessing about what you're putting out there because you're afraid somebody's going to copy it or something's going to happen, like you just got to kind of let it go and trust that people want to
Yeah.
purchase and learn from you because they like how you deliver it and they like how you explain things. Don't worry about anything else.
Exactly. I agree completely. When we're representing brands, we have
Mhm.
similar conversations, and there are very few brands who are putting out a product that can't be replicated, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're dealing with patents, which is not the topic of today's conversation. If you're putting out a product and it's good, you're going to get people ripping you off within a month. No
Hmm.
question. There's just no going around that. Well, obviously, get your registered trademarks and do all the stuff you need to do to protect your brand as a whole, but don't sweat every imitator that pops up because just like Audrey says, people are coming to you because of what you built, because of your recognition. In the example of, creators, knowledge-based creators, it's because of your personality and the way you deliver things that other people are not going to be able to replicate. Even if they copied your video note for note, it's not going to be the same, and people are not going to want to go to those folks because it's not you.
Yeah. I mean, listen, like, so I'm a big martini drinker. That is my cocktail of choice. Like, in theory, a martini should be the same everywhere you go, but I still have my places I like to get my martinis and my places I don't like to get a martini at the end of the day. Like, it's still vodka and olive juice. I don't drink with those. I will sometimes dip into the gin pool, but it is typically like vodka and some olive juice for me and a lot of ice, like really, really cold ice, but still like what I'm getting at different places, like I still have my number one place that I like to go if I want a martini. I will settle for the other places, but
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. My number one place is always going to be my number one place. And like, don't worry about the fact that like the fact that I can get a martini elsewhere doesn't stop me from wanting to get my martini at my number one spot.
that's great. And I think it's particularly important and salient to remember that, especially when you're a creator, because most of your life is on digital, looking at other
Yeah.
folks' channels and worrying about it.
Hmm.
And you can't live that way. It's just you'll
Yeah.
end up just getting stasis and not being able to move forward.
Yes.
So creators who are doing pretty well, let's say when is a good time to reach out to somebody like you and start thinking about the next step? Like what makes sense from their career path from start to, let's say, year 3, 5, 6, 7?
So there's a couple of specific things that we look for. So number one, I want to make sure you actually have something to say and you actually have something of value to put out in the market. Whether, and that doesn't mean, to our earlier points, what you're saying is something that doesn't exist in different packaging, but it means that like you have perspective that is an experience to bring and share with other people. I don't want you to just be like regurgitating the same thing over and over and over and over again. Or like for on the most extreme example, like we're probably, and this is no shade on them, I love them, like we're probably not going to work with like a beauty influencer who is just like doing lots of get ready with me videos unless they have like something specific about like technique or makeup application that they'd want to share, and have enough information in there to share it to create multiple products or multiple information over long periods of time. So that's number one in terms of what we specifically look for. I think in terms of just general wanting to expand into this, it's do you have an engaged audience? And that's not about like, do you have hundreds of thousands of followers? Like I have a colleague who I love dearly who has a very successful business, not as a creator, but she happens to have a large following. And she happens to have a large following because one of her best friends is a celebrity that has a very large following.
Mm.
So a lot of her followers follow her because they want like the inside scoop. She does not have lots of people ready to buy something related to her expertise. So even though like her audience is much bigger than any of my other clients. So I think like thinking about that of like, do you have an audience who wants to buy from you and isn't wanting maybe some sort of like parasocial relationship or just wanting to like kind of spy on you essentially, which is how it can be with some creators. And then once you kind of pass that sniff test, are people asking you the same questions over and over again? Are they asked what kinds of questions are they asking you? Are there themes within that? Is there something that they want from you that is more than what you can share in 75 seconds online in videos over and over again? Is there a level of depth that you can share? And then what does that look like? And also what does that look like for you? I think something that can be assumed is that like you create a course, you publish it, and then you're done. And that is not the case. There is this really great thing called customer support that needs a lot of work once you put something out in the world because people can't figure out their login. People have issues with their billing. People want to cancel. They want a refund. Doesn't matter what was in your refund policy. They're still going to ask for it. Like there's just you are building a business once you start publishing content like this in a paid fashion. So just be prepared for all of the additional support and departments that come along with it.
And the updates that will be needed, because if it's a one and
Yes.
done, it's almost like, what's the point, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have a client who's in the nutrition space, and like we were talking with her yesterday, she's like I have this whole subsection of her content that doesn't talk anything about like GLP-1s, and like she does a nutrition certification like training program, and she's like, I need to be arming these people that we've certified to talk about these products that people are asking them about, so like making sure you are up to date and that you are doing your own appropriate professional development to do that, or bring in the right experts to do that on your behalf to make sure what you're teaching is up to date.
Yeah. We have a question in the chat. I'm not sure I completely follow. It says, what are the best types of creatives for small law firms today? Assuming that's directed at both of us. I don't know, Ellen, if you mind elaborating on that, Audrey, unless you have a sense of what that's asking.
I have no idea.
We'll let
I
her
mean, I
take
could
it.
assume, but I don't know.
Yeah. There are some hilarious law firm accounts that I follow that I wake up to every day, but we won't get into that. Lorena, I know you've been quiet for the last little bit. Any questions that we overlooked you want to ask Audrey?
Well, I guess like I would want to know like, what specifically signals to you that a creator is ready to turn their knowledge into a course, a membership, or any sort of digital product.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think one, it's audience, and does your audience want it? And then on the creator side, it's do you want it? Do you want that type of business? We just worked with somebody who we were kind of going through a curriculum development process and, we were getting a lot of feedback from her that it was like feeling really coachy. And I'm like, well, teaching is kind of a form of coaching in a different way, and it's hard to teach something without also giving them the motivation and the mindset work that comes with it. And I think that can get a very bad rap that doesn't matter, but if you think about like the best teachers that you had growing up, it's not probably because of what they like taught you in terms of tangible things. It's how they supported you through the learning process and gave you the motivation and the encouragement through it. And like, that's not a bad thing. That's what makes them excellent educators and leaders. And so if you want to like lead and teach online, you have to have that like understanding of what mindset shifts need to happen, which again, like I know feels so like wooey to say that, which is so silly because that's how we get better is by shifting how our mind thinks and works. So you have to be ready to lead that for your students and the people that follow you. Otherwise, like this is a responsibility that maybe you shouldn't be taking on.
So you find then as a result, a lot of those creators have to become more accessible. How does that play out in a day to day?
I think you have to understand that where you are and where the person who's buying from you are not the same. So how can you help them bridge the gap of what that is? Like they're probably not going to be exactly where you are today by the time they're done, but like where are they? You have to understand where they are at the beginning and where they're trying to go and what has to happen to kind of bridge that gap. Like for example, if you are in the like fitness and wellness space, I feel like that's a very easy one to understand for a lot of people. If you're like, let's say you're trying to start to run a marathon for the first time, getting up every single day to run is a big lifestyle change, and you have to like literally retrain yourself in terms of how you think about your morning routine and your schedule and your dedication to commit to running a marathon. And any like that needs to get applied to anything you are learning and getting better at. So you have to give them the tools to go from who they are in like day one, never run a marathon before, to person who can run however many. I've never run a marathon, so I don't know. It's like 23.6, 26 points, one of those numbers. Anyways, a lot of miles. It's really hard. So like and the person who runs a marathon versus the person who's never done it, they're in very different stages. So how can you get them there through guidance and education and coaching? And it kind of takes a combination of all three.
Hmm. I do have another question. So, how would you say that a creator's positioning changes once they do have their own intellectual property or their own programs?
Um, I kind of hope it doesn't change too much and that they have been kind of on a natural trajectory. Like it shouldn't be a like massive flip. It should feel very natural, organic if you have been building up to it in the right way. Like you are probably going from just creating content to answering questions on your question box sticker to okay, maybe now I'm sending out some things in an email to like it should be a natural evolution. It shouldn't be just like I'm putting on a different hat today and I'm a totally different person, so I think if you are having that big of an identity shift of who you are as a creator, you probably haven't done the work to set yourself up to actually succeed in this endeavor yet. Is that too mean?
No, that feels very real. That makes a lot of sense. We are getting towards end of time, so I will again encourage everybody in the audience to type in any questions you might have. We usually wrap up in about 5-10 minutes, but Audrey, any like major takeaways, any things we forgot to ask, anything top of mind that you really want to put out there to the audience?
Um, We'll definitely get a lawyer, I think, if you're going to do any of this. I feel like we didn't actually like say that enough times, but
I mean,
that is
that's the subtext with all of these webinars. Like
please always get a
yeah,
lawyer.
work with the people that we're introducing to, but don't forget that we're probably important to have somewhere in the background as well. Appreciate that.
I think whoever you are working with to represent you, to partner with, make sure that they are really out there to be an advocate for you and your business. Our best clients and our most successful clients, you know, I'm very honored to say that they will like say that about us. We had a brand deal we were working on with the client last week, and the brand was asking for a third round of revisions, which was over their contract. and the brand wouldn't put any overage charges when we signed the contract if there were extra rounds of revision. So I said to my client, I was like, listen, if you want to do this final round, you can. That is your prerogative. However, I want you to know that you're over, and I'm going to tell them that. And, they need to either like simplify their edits or accept the last round because we kind of kept like changing direction every time. And she was like, I've never had a manager like tell me to stop revising. I would just keep doing it. And I'm like, yeah, that's like not a good use of your time. And also that's
Absolutely.
not what you're being
Absolutely.
paid for, you
And
know?
you need somebody to tell the brand that, because the difference, that this is what I always say, the difference between someone at a brand versus you as a creator is that person in the brand is just, they're making a salary. They have set
Yes.
defined role, they have their set monthly income, and that's
Hmm.
it. Your income, your revenue is
Right.
based on your output. It's a
Yeah.
very, very different equation, and you need somebody on your team to express that to them, whether it's someone like Audrey or if you're unrepped, expressing it yourself and getting that across.
Yeah.
And I think one of the earlier things you said, which is just so key, and also what makes this industry, and I say that term loosely, so different from, let's say, traditional areas of entertainment,
Hmm.
is there is no one size fits all for creators.
Yeah.
We the difference between a creator who focuses on medical versus a creator who focuses on fitness is leagues apart, and those are two areas that run very parallel to each other. So
Yeah.
you need to really know that whenever you're bringing on a team member, they truly understand your business. If you're talking to an
Yeah.
agent who wants to rep you, who's going to end up taking 10% of your income moving forward, make sure they understand you, make sure they understand the stuff you're putting out there, what your underlying goals are, what your value, where your values lie, that they're not going to be pitching you for things that just don't match with you, because there is no specific rubric
Yeah.
for this type of work. It is expanding out. It is changing constantly. The goalposts are always shifting. The ability to earn revenue is always coming from different places every couple of years. And it's important to work with somebody that really is going to do a deep dive into your business, that you can walk
Hmm.
away from a call with them going, oh, they identified a bunch of things about me that I wasn't even thinking about. I think that's one way to
Yeah.
to look at it. And if they're just seeing you as a means to just continue your exact same business model, that's not necessarily going to work. You'll end
Yeah.
up losing money, you'll end up not growing and not getting the sustainability you need.
Yeah.
Um, Rena Meach says, when you start to build an audience, how can you determine what streams of potential revenue would be the best for your individual business?
So I look at this from two ways. One, I think you should ask your audience. I think when you start to build an audience, it's actually not the right time to determine what your revenue streams are. If you're a service business or like an agency, like I don't get business from online. So like my revenue streams and how I think about that is very different, right? Like I think about that in terms of a lot of other things. But if you want to make money off of a creator business, I think you should focus on building an audience of like right fit people. Like what's the thing you want them to get from you? That's like what I always ask people at the beginning. Like if you look 18 months from now, like I want people to say like Audrey helped me like open my eyes to how I can have a sustainable creator business outside of partnerships. Like that is something I want people to say about me. So I'm like, okay, that's the North Star. Everything we create should be in that direction, And then as you're building that audience of people who can start to say that, then start to ask them like, what questions do you have? What resources do you need? Let them tell you where you can fill in the gaps. Because if you're creating for what you think they need, it's not necessarily going to be the right fit. We call it the symptom versus the solution problem. Where a lot of times an audience wants to treat a symptom because that's something acute that they can feel, but as the solution provider, you know what the root cause is. So you want to solve for the root cause and you're trying to sell them the root cause, but they don't even know that root cause exists. So they don't buy it from you. So you have to figure out what those symptoms are that people are aware of and talk to those and start to sell to those.
I love that simple advice of, like, if you're getting enough people asking you a question, really explore what that means. It seems so
Hmm.
obvious, but it also is not necessarily something that I think a lot of people would stop to really contemplate.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough when you are starting to build an audience. I mean, the tough part is there is a period of time where you will not be that marketable, right? And you kind
Yeah.
of have to be okay with that. And it's like I was saying earlier, so many creators we work with fell backwards into it. So it's tough to be intentional about this, unless you are already coming at it with an incredibly focused and narrow sort of background and skill set that you just want to grow, which some people have. It sounds like some of your clients are kind of coming at it from that angle, but if you're coming at it from just like a more general approach, it sounds like it's too premature to ask a question like that in the first year or so.
Yeah, and it's, to your point about the creators who kind of fell into it, it's because they're often building in public as they're learning something. And we as consumers really like to learn from people who are one or two steps ahead of us because that feels way more possible. It's kind of in the same way, like if you're an intern and you like get a meeting with the CEO, it probably feels like really unrelatable. It'd be like, how do I become a CEO when I'm 21? But if you're 21 and you're talking to somebody who's 25 and you're like, how did you get there? That you're like, okay, that's really close. You took these steps that I can see and understand. So the people who kind of fell into these large audiences tend to be that person who's at that like, who's that 25-year-old talking to that, not literally, but that those stages. And the people who are in that like equivalent of that CEO seat talking back sometimes have a hard time putting them back in the seat of that 21-year-old. And that's why experts can often struggle to create content because they're like very far removed. So you have to really put yourself back in the mindset of the person who's really learning what you want them to learn.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, even just in my own life, I remember when I was starting as a junior, teaching me the most were only about 4 or 5 years ahead of me.
Yeah.
It wasn't the guys at the very top of the firm. So that makes perfect sense. We're about at time. So I guess, Audrey, I will leave it to you. Just, I know I already put you to task with like any final comments, but what's a final either takeaway or just something you'd like to leave the audience with?
I would say like, I mean, if you're new on the content side, like just start and just put yourself out there and test. And I would say like, no matter what stage you're in, like always be testing, always be taking
Yep.
feedback and always be iterating. The people who are the most successful and have the longest careers do so because they are always listening to their audience. And, they know how to filter out the noise. That's also really important. But they are connecting to what people still need. The people who fall out develop too big of an ego to listen to the people who got them where they are in the first place and can't sustain it and just like falter. So just don't forget the people who got you where they are and like always stay closely connected to them.
That's great. And Audrey, if people want to find you, where can they reach you?
Well, if you're on LinkedIn, you can follow and connect with us here on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post more and like practice what I preach. Or you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is just my name. But yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really enjoyable talk. And again, thank you everybody who has attended today and everyone who's watching this on YouTube down the road. We will be announcing our next webinar sometime in the next week or so, featuring our friend Timothy Cooper, who's a WGA writer and also a script instructor and teacher. So come to that one. I have a feeling we're going to be talking way more about artificial intelligence than I'd like, but that's kind of the way things go these days. So thank you once again, Audrey. Thank you so much. And we will see you all next month.